Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I wanted to do something a little different than usual and discuss the sort of tradition that I follow every year, and that is my yearly anime rewatch list. Now for this channel, I watch a lot of new anime, as well as a lot of new movies and shows over on Laughingstock Cinema. This is either in an effort to review them, or because I also have a strong passion for the art forms. However, in addition to that, I also have a collection of different anime that I rewatch every year for fun. These are stories and worlds I love to go back to and experience time and time again, either for their stellar craft or because of their adrenaline-pumping action. Some of them are popular anime series, as well as classic movies and even some OVAs. So I'm going to be sharing them with you today, and I also ask that you share your own list down below in the comments. I also have one for movies, which I may do over on Laughingstock Cinema if you guys are interested. But without further ado, let's get into this video. So I'm going to be breaking this list up into 3 categories. Number 1 will be Mainstays. These are anime that I rewatch every year with only rare exceptions. Number 2 will be Alternates. These are the series that I rewatch every other year or whenever I'm in the mood. And finally, number 3 will be Newcomers. As the name would suggest, these are anime that I've seen recently that I like so much I'm going to be adding them to my yearly lineup. So let's begin with the Mainstays. And first up, I'm going to talk about the most obvious one, which is the Dragon Ball franchise. Every year I rewatch Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, and Dragon Ball Super. And I've done this every year since I was a kid, because of course it is my favorite anime franchise, which I'm guessing you guys got the idea of by watching my channel. But until recently, GT was more of one that I rewatched every once in a while as opposed to every year. However, due to my taste changing as I've grown older, and in an effort to cover them on my YouTube channel, I added GT and now Dragon Ball Super to this list. And while I don't enjoy watching either of those series as much as Dragon Ball or Z, there certainly are some moments and concepts I enjoy along the way. Next up is my second favorite anime franchise, which is Yu Yu Hakusho, which is such a great and rewatchable series, much like the Dragon Ball franchise. And every single year I have to rewatch this show so I can revisit all of the great characters and their journey throughout the arcs. And much like the Dragon Ball franchise, I not only watch it in its completion every year, but I go back time and time again to the manga and to certain episodes just to rewatch some of the amazing moments. And it's one that I highly recommend to anime fans, along with all of the others on this list. And next up is Yoshihiro Togashi's second manga in anime, Hunter x Hunter, in this case 2011, which I never really watched until I was older. I only knew that Togashi was involved in it. However, from the first time I saw it, I knew it was great, and it's become one of my favorite anime of all time. However, although many people continue to ask me about it, I'm not caught up on the manga, and I haven't seen the original anime from the 90s either, although I may consider watching it very soon. But speaking of another anime from the 90s, I want to get into Trigun, which is another anime much like Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho that aired on Toonami back in the 90s and early 2000s, and it quickly became one of my favorite anime of all time. The combination of science fiction with the Western genre and the awesome anime style and elements that are added to it by Naitao are really great. And it has some great characters, concepts, and shootouts along the way. And it's not too long of an anime either, so it's pretty easy to rewatch. Up next is Mob Psycho 100, which was created by the mangaka One, who is most popular for another anime I'm going to be talking about shortly. But Mob Psycho for me is something that I've really enjoyed since the first time I saw it, and the more times I go back and watch it, the more that I think it might be the superior of One's creations. Not only does it have some great humorous elements that he incorporates in his other works, but it also has some strong character development, and a character who feels a lot more vulnerable despite still being incredibly overpowered. And the second season is absolutely incredible and worth checking out. And this leads into One's most popular IP right now, which is One Punch Man. which I saw before Mob Psycho, and it's one of those anime that combines awesome action, animation, and a funny satirical lampooning of the superhero genre. It's a lot of fun to watch, and Saitama is a pretty entertaining main character, although I don't really think that the show has the same level of depth as Mob Psycho. But I haven't seen season 2 yet, which a lot of people seem to be concerned when it came to the animation since it switched studios. However, despite being an animated medium, the story and the characters and what's being conveyed is more important to me than flashy animation anyway. Although after the season is finished airing, I may go and watch it and do a comparison video between that and Mob Psycho. And wrapping up the mainstays would have to be the Vampire Hunter D movies. These are some awesome anime movies based on the Vampire Hunter D franchise that I saw when I was a teenager and have loved ever since, especially Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, which was done by Madhouse and has some great animation, but also has a really interesting take on vampires, with Vampire Hunter D being kind of like Blade, a vampire who goes around slaying other vampires to put an end to their evil species. I'm still waiting for the anime series that was announced years ago. I just hope they don't ruin it like they did with Berserk, but I'm sure it'll still be a better vampire story than Twilight. So those are the anime that I rewatch every year. But what about the alternates? Well, first up would have to be another one of my favorite anime, Full Metal Alchemist, which includes the original anime and Brotherhood. Now, I've seen a lot of debates online about which of these is actually better between the two, although for me, I personally prefer Brotherhood. However, I do love both of them, and I think it's by far one of the greatest anime of all time. Not only in terms of writing, but consistency, story, characters, the list goes on and on. And if I have the time, I usually like to watch at least one of them every year, although sometimes I don't get the chance. Up next is Outlaw Star, which is another classic Toonami anime that I loved as a kid. It's the story of Gene Starwind and his group of outlaws, who have a special prototype ship with an enhanced humanoid AI. And they go around the galaxy getting involved in bounty hunting, as well as some big mystical things that have massive ramifications for the rest of the universe. It's kind of similar in concept to Cowboy Bebop, although it goes in a pretty different direction. And it's also yet another shorter anime that's easy to watch. And that leads into my next one, which is Tekkaman Blade 2. Now, I like the original Tekkaman, which was renamed Technoman over here in the United States. However, I think I prefer Tekkaman Blade 2 because it's a much shorter and more focused OVA, whereas the original one is really one of those typical action animes from the 80s that's kind of villain of the week and rinse repeat. I was first shown both these series by a friend of mine, and it's one of those series that we would rewatch every year whenever we would hang out. The next one is also about mechs, although these ones are way bigger than a human, ranging from planetary to bigger than galaxies, and that is Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, which, while being a giant mech fighting series, is also kind of satirical of those that came before it. And it really takes elements like the power of friendship and the human spirit and giant mechs to the absolute maximum. If you want to see an anime with powerful characters that might be able to defeat even Dragon Ball Super characters, or if you just like awesome, fun, ridiculous mech series, I would highly recommend this. Another classic series I saw over on Toonami that I rewatch every few years or so would have to be Rurouni Kenshin, which is an awesome samurai action series featuring the main character of Kenshin, although Kenshin used to be known as the Batosai, the Manslayer. However, by the time of the story, he's trying to put all of that behind himself and live a peaceful life. But things keep coming back to haunt him and involve him in the action. Again, it has some awesome fights and it's a really nostalgic series that fans of 90s animation should check out. And the next two series are kind of similar shows that I don't usually rewatch in their entirety, but I do go back to some classic moments and episodes from time to time, or I watch some of the newer continuing shows that are in the franchise. And the first one would have to be Yu-Gi-Oh! And I used to be a huge Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan back in its prime in the United States, when the show was airing on WB and Cartoon Network, and not only was I really into the anime, but also the card game, which I used to own tons of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards and would duel all the time. However, with age and after seeing it in the Japanese, I've come to realize just how awful the English dub was. People like to complain about the Dragon Ball Z dub, but the Yu-Gi-Oh dub makes so many changes and literally edits the show at points to where it completely changes events. But nonetheless, it's fun to go back to some of the most epic moments of the series, if even for nostalgia's sake. Although at this point, I'm far more into the game, specifically on Duel Links. And the same goes for the next series on this list, which is Pokemon. Now, ever since I was a kid and Pokemon was first introduced to the United States, I've been a big fan of it. However, to be honest, I've always been way more of a fan of the games than I have of the anime. The fact that Ash is just a terrible trainer who makes awful decisions, never ages, and almost always loses when the big events are happening, not to mention how kiddie the show has become, although that's a big symptom of the entire Pokemon franchise at this point, kinda makes it hard for me to enjoy a lot of it. Although I do check out classic moments from the series, as well as some of the newer series from time to time. But ultimately, it's the main core video games that have always made me love this franchise. And that's what I'm going to continue to revisit the most as the years continue. Now, those are the anime that have already been on this list. But what about the newcomers? Well, I'm sure you'll recognize some of these. First up would be an anime that I started watching earlier this year and has quickly become one of my favorite anime of all time, and that is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is just an awesome franchise. It's an epic story featuring the Joestar family over the course of generations, and the creator Araki not only has some great art in his manga, but he also knows how to write characters and action in a very compelling way. And of course, it is called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for a reason, because this anime gets really weird along the way. But if you're into that kind of thing, and most of the other anime on this list, I would heavily recommend it. After that, we have My Hero Academia, which is another show I began watching in the past year and really came to like. It's a well-directed and animated series that explores what it means to be a hero and focuses mostly on a group of up-and-coming teenage superheroes, almost kind of like Young Justice or Teen Titans. And I can definitely see why it became so popular. And for me, I really enjoyed watching it and plan to rewatch it, as well as watch the future seasons as the years go on. And finally, we have Netflix's Castlevania, which appeals to me in many of the same ways that the Vampire Hunter D movies do. It takes elements from the awesome Castlevania video games, and then fleshes out those stories in anime form, with some awesome vampire versus Belmont action, incorporating magic, mystical items, and it's just a pretty badass and metal show overall. And it's also pretty short right now, so it's easy to rewatch. Although, considering how many video games came after where they ended the story, it seems like Netflix is probably just getting started. So this has been my yearly anime rewatch list. Now, because this list is based on my personal taste, it's subject to change. I'm always watching new anime, so I won't be surprised if I revisit it next year, and this list looks a lot different. But what about some of your favorite anime that you rewatch every year? Do you have a list like me? If so, share it with me down below in the comments. I'd also like to see other YouTubers share their own lists, maybe in videos like this, so you should share this video and let them know. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.